Be happy to hear.
Big,
Yeah.
it's a big mitzvah.
She thinks it's a big mitzvah to let her help.
Okay. So what we were looking at yesterday is borrowing someone's item without their permission. And Rav Sharaga came out to be more machmir, whereas when we looked at some of the sources,
I'm not sure.
yeah, thanks. When you look at some of the sources that were brought in the Makor Baruch, there's definitely room to be lenient when you're borrowing something that's not going to be consumed. Okay, that was the really important distinction that we made in the footnote yesterday. There's a difference between going into someone's field or going into their fridge and person says, I'm not going to get home until 5 o'clock. Go ahead, make yourself at home, and your bedroom's on this place, and make yourself at home, right? It doesn't say anything more. So then I go to the refrigerator and I see this amazing cheesecake, and I end up eating half of
You
it.
could say that's what I would do at home.
Yeah, and so that's one area where the poskim say that even if you think they would have wanted you to help yourself to it, but if the person didn't give you express permission to do so, you should be machmir.
Especially if it has someone's name in the fridge.
Yeah,
That's what
well,
kids used to do.
right.
Reserved for.
Yeah. Because even if they come back and they say, "Oh, you tell them, oh, I found the cheesecake in the fridge," and they really would love to tell you that they were saving it for Shabbos or something, but they don't want to make you feel bad, and so they would say, "Oh, I wish you would have taken. We have an even better cheesecake downstairs in the freezer, right? You should have that's an even better one, right?" And what they really mean to say is, "Oh my gosh,
They have a better cheesecake at Sobeys.
we have to go back to Sobeys and buy another one, right?" Right. So that's one area. But if it's a question of borrowing something that's not going to be consumed, like he has a gaming console or whatever, or whatever it is. So then there's definitely room to be more makel. And even though Rav Sharaga is more machmir here, but the footnote brought a number of poskim who say that you can be more lenient. Okay.
The item deteriorates as a result of the usage.
Well, that's even more problematic because you're a shoel, you're a borrower. So even if the person gives you full permission to borrow his items, you still have to assume responsibility even for onus, right? So like I'm a guest at your home and I go into your home and I accidentally break something. So I'm definitely liable to make restitution. But he may be moichel because he's a friend or whatever it is, if it's normal wear and tear, but it all depends. It all depends on the situation. If he finds your baseball card collection, and then he starts flipping cards with a Mickey Mantle, or whatever, that's dereliction. Okay. All right, let's go on to Siman Kuf Lamed, the next tshuva. Din moreh beveit sefer shalokach chayfetz l'talmid shemafriya b'shiur. Okay, this is an important shaila. I've seen this brought down in a number of places. Teachers confiscate items from kids in class because the child was disruptive. And now the question is, what is the halachic responsibility of the teacher vis-a-vis the item that they've confiscated? Are they allowed to permanently confiscate an item? Are they even permitted to confiscate it in the first place? And how do you deal with that from a halakhic
Still
standpoint?
relevant now with the cell phone thing. There was a meeting in the last few weeks at the beginning of the academic year.
There was a what?
Cell phone ban in public schools.
Oh, really?
So there's a cell phone ban in public schools.
I didn't know that.
Teachers were complaining that if they take the cell phones from the kids, are they then responsible for them? It's exactly what they didn't want to be responsible for. And
Wow.
it's exactly what was in the news.
Oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know that this was a thing.
Yeah. Mhm.
Well, I'm glad. I think that at least the Toronto School Board District is what is it?
TDSB.
TDSB. This school board, right? At least they know how to do something right.
Yeah.
Okay.
They know about Palestinian field trips.
Yeah, right. All right. So let's see. Ani moreh beveit sefer, umidei pam hatalmidim meviim itam kol minei chafetzim v'telefonim. He says, or she says, I'm a teacher in a school. And occasionally students bring all different kinds of things and phones, hamafriyim lemahalech hatakin shel hashiur, that are disruptive to the classroom. Ha'im mutar li lakachat miyadam et hachafatzim hanal kidei shelo yafriyu b'shir. Am I allowed to confiscate these items from the students? Uma hadin im hinachli et hachefetz b'megira v'nignav. Furthermore, what is the halacha if I put the item in my drawer, my desk drawer, and it gets stolen? Ha'im ani chayav b'achrayuto? Am I liable for that item? Am I the responsible party? Okay, so the tshuva. Pashut hadavar shetafkido shel hamoire lelamed et talmidav lelo chol mafriya. It is clear, it is obvious that the role of a teacher is to teach without there being disruption in the classroom. Ki hamorehu ke'ein apotropos shel hatalmid lelamdo ulahadricho b'derech ha'emet. I really like this language. A teacher is considered a custodian for the student. And when we say a custodian, it means that the parent appoints the teacher by sending them into the classroom as someone who is appointed to teach the child and to guide them on the path of truth. V'im eino shomea lo, and if the student does not listen to the teacher, kosov harambam shemuter lahakoto ma'at kedei lechancho. The Rambam writes that it is permitted to strike the child lightly in order to educate him. Where is this in the Rambam? He quotes the Rambam right here. Umakeh otam hamelamed lahatil alehem ema. The teacher is permitted to strike the children in order to instill fear within them. Ve'eno makeh otam makat oyev musar achzari, but he may not strike them as an enemy would strike with cruelty.
This would apply to parents too.
Yes, of course. Yeah, okay. V'im kain, kol shekain shemuter lo lakachat chafatzim shemafriim lo lilmod. And certainly, therefore, it is permissible to confiscate items from a child that will prevent him from fulfilling that task of learning. Va'adarabba, imhu lo lokeach lo, umashir oto lesachek b'mischakim shelo. And to the contrary, if you don't confiscate the item and you let the child play with his little electronic game, over al arur oseh melechet Hashem remiyah, then you accept a curse upon yourself. As Yirmiyah said, cursed is the man who does the work of God with deceit. Because you're allowing that child, instead of learning in the classroom, you're just leaving them to their own devices, literally, to play with their own narishkeit, right? So, and what does he say in the Makor Baruch? He says, quotes the Gemara in Bava Basra, Shahamalamed shel Yoav limedo b'taut. Yoav was King David's general, and he taught him, and Yoav's teacher, according to the Gemara, taught him erroneously. Va'al kain hargo Yoav lechad mando amar sham al pimai dichtiv arur oseh melechet Hashem remiyah. So according to one opinion, Yoav actually killed his teacher because he didn't teach him properly about the word Amalek in the Torah. The Gemara, I believe, says that the teacher told him, Timcha et Zachar Amalek. You shall wipe out the males of Amalek instead of Zecher Amalek, which is the memory of Amalek. Okay. V'od ayin berambam shekasav shim hamalamed mitrashel b'talmudam hareza b'chlal meleches Hashem remiyah. The Rambam actually quotes this pasuk in Yirmiyah that cursed is the man who does God's work with a deceit, referring to a teacher who is lax in his responsibility to teach the students. We've seen this before, that being a teacher is a very, very serious undertaking. And if it's done properly, you're rewarded greatly. But if it's done with negligence, then you really are very, very punishable. Aval kemuvan shetzarech lahachzir lo et ze bizman sheyireh hamoreh shezeh hirtia et hatalmid shelo yachzor l'sachek b'mischakim be'emtza hashiur. But it should be also obvious that the teacher has an obligation to return the item to the student at such time when he feels that I've kept it long enough so that the kid knows that he's never going to play again with it in the classroom. You're not allowed to deny it from the student permanently because it's really the property of the student. But rather give it back to the child by the end of the year. Now, the Makor Baruch on this says, he says, did Zeb Pasha. He says, why is it obvious that you have to return the item to the student and you can't confiscate it permanently? Di'im lokein havi gezel biyado, v'gam gezel katan aser. Because otherwise you're stealing from a child.
And at the end of the year,
He says the end of the year.
But if he's learned his lesson, you have to wait till the end.
You don't have to wait till the end of the year. He says, wait until you feel the child has sufficiently learned his lesson. V'chein kasef b'shut mishnah halachos ayin sham sherich bazeh. Rav Menashe Klein also has this, is that Mishnah Halachos? I believe so. Yeah, who says that also it would be gezel, it would be thievery if you don't return the item to the student.
we give it back to the parents.
Well, right. Although it's not clear if you just give it back to the parents, because if the parents gave it as property to the child, it's the child's property. V'chein kasav hapischei choshen b'pshitus. Rav Blau said the same thing. V'chein kasav b'yalkut Yosef v'ayin sham b'mishnah halachos v'pischei choshen shosifu shemurta lo melamed lakachet et hachefetz afilu al dat shelo lahachziro imzeh litzorach chinuch ayin sham. That these posts can actually go a little bit further. And they say that you're allowed to take it with the intent of not returning it if it's for the purposes of chinuch. In other words, they're prepared to say that there are certain instances where you're even allowed to hold on to it permanently if it's to educate the child. Amnam ayin b'sefer shari mishpat shekasav b'tzarach iyun eich nahagu melamdim lakachas chafatzim mitalmidim v'lo chashashu legezel. But there's another sefer shari mishpat who questions this. What right do teachers have to confiscate items that belong to the student? Why isn't there a problem of theft, of stealing? Because of the Shemahu Midin Shebeit HaSefer Yochol Lahasiya Al Kitzato the Isa B'Bavavasra Ve'al Kein Kol HaNichnas Lilmod Sham Al Das Kein Hu Nichnas Shem Yafriya B'Shir Efshir Yilo Kachas Lo Asachefetz Ayin Sham. It could be that there's a tacit acceptance of anyone who comes into the classroom, that anyone who enters into the classroom will forfeit their items if they are disruptive to the class or to the student's ability to learn.
You're able to make it explicit too, right, before the year starts.
Yeah.
Yeah, but one additional complexity that came out of this whole discussion in Toronto
Yeah.
was that the parents want the child to have the phone, and in fact, 50% of the calls that come through during the day are from the parent.
Yeah.
And so now you've got this conflict between.
You have angry
teacher and
parents. Yeah. Right. And so that's just a sign of that our parents have become snowflakes.
Yeah.
Right. And
even if it's preventing their kid from learning.
yeah, exactly. And that's a serious problem. It's a serious problem with Western civilization in general, is that parenting has become something totally different from from the norm that we grew up with, where a parent has to be stern with a child for the child's sake. And now the parents are scared of their own kids.
And there's lack of respect for the school coming from the parents as well.
Lack of
Doesn't
respect.
help either.
No one respects anybody. Parents don't respect the school. Kids don't respect the parents. Kids don't respect the school. And the kids are becoming wilde chayas. Yeah. So it's a serious problem. Okay. So aval kemuvan shetzarach lishmor et hachefetz b'makom hamishtamer. So here's the thing. Obviously, if a teacher has a right to confiscate items, but has an obligation to return them, so they have to keep the item in a protected area that will be under lock and key. Dim lo heniach oto b'makom hamishtamer v'nignav, because if they leave it in a place which is unprotected and it gets stolen, ze pshia b'shmira v'chayav l'shalem. So then that's negligence, okay? And then they would have to compensate the child. Lachein im hamor hiniach et ze b'megera petucha b'makom shenichnasim sham talmidim v'yotzim lelo kol bikoret. And therefore, if the teacher leaves it in an unlocked drawer where students have access to that area and they can go in and out without any inspection, ze pshia u'pashut shechayav l'shalem. So then that would be a negligence on behalf of the teacher to take the cell phone and then put it into the teacher's drawer, which is totally unlocked. Vim hamora hishtamesh b'chayfetz, kevin sha'asalo lihishtamesh b'zeh nasel of gazlan b'chayav afilu ba'onsin. If the teacher uses the child's game, say the teacher confiscates the kid's game and then starts playing with it, so then that's usher also. But if that happens, then the teacher is not just chayav for, when you're a shomer chinam, you're not chayav for theft. You're only chayav for negligence. So if the teacher puts it under lock and then the kids break the lock in order to retrieve the, items and they steal this kid's phone, so then the teacher is not liable unless the teacher was playing with the item, playing with the phone. If the teacher played with the phone, then even if it was under lock and the kids broke in, so then the teacher would be liable even for that. He says, and as the Makor Baruch points out, he says, "V'hainu taima dedino shel hamalamed kedin shomer chinam shechayev b'pshia." He says, let's examine this from a shomer standpoint. The teacher has the din of a shomer chinam who's liable for negligence. K'moshe nifsak b'shulchan aruch v'chein kasav b'shut mishnah halachos shedino kishomer chinam. That's what Rav Klein writes, that he's a shomer chinam. Aval hosif sham she'efsher the din hamalamed kishomer sachar kevin shekabel tashlum al hayotim malamed v'zechelek me'avodato. But argues Rav Klein, maybe his level of shmira is a shomer sachar, not just a shomer chinam. Why? Because he's getting paid. He gets paid a salary to do his job. So if he's getting a salary to do his job, which includes confiscating disruptive items, so then because of sheyesh li'it yashev b'davar, and he says we have to really think about this. Amna meidach gisa ein bepischei Choshen sham shetzida b'pshitu she'en l'malamed klal din shomer v'lachein pater afilu mipshia. Rav Bloy, however, is of the opinion that he doesn't have the law of a shomer at all. And maybe it'd be good to bring up these different opinions. We'll take a look at Rav Menashe Klein in just a moment. Rav Bloy is of the opinion that you don't have the din of a shomer at all, that you're not even responsible, because part of the rule that you accept when you put your kid in school is we will confiscate items that will be returned to your student at the end of the year, but we assume no responsibility for these items. We'll do our best to protect them, but if anything, and that would probably be a good thing to write into the parent manual.
I'm sure it's there.
Oh, really?
I'm sure it's there.
Uvesefer mishpatei haTorah pshita leida havi shomer chinam ve'afal pi shelo kibul of klal chiyuvei shmira v'gam ein ritzano bekach. And Sefer Mishpatei Torah says a similar thing, that he is a shomer chinam, even though he didn't want to accept the responsibility of being a shomer. Mikol makam havi ke'ein shomer aveda kevin shetzarach lachasira b'sof hashana. But since he knows that he has to return it by the end of the year, it's like he's watching over a lost item. Begam shitale delo havi shomer sachar. And he also says it's obvious to him that you're not a shomer sachar, that you're not a paid guard, because you're not being paid to watch the kids' confiscated items. You're paid to teach. In other words, it's like what teachers always say: I'm not being paid to discipline kids. I'm paid to teach kids, right? Why should I have to spend half the class getting the classroom in order? It's very frustrating for teachers. Well, in a similar vein, a teacher's not paid to be responsible for confiscated items that they've confiscated. That's not what you're paying me for. The imnema dahavi kishomer aveda, and then furthermore, if we say that he's like watching over a lost item, yesh lahayr the davar zetoli b'machlokes maran v'rama. He says, well, then you have a machlokus between the machaber and the rama. The Moran HaShulchan Aruch pasuk the din shomer aveda kishomer sachar, the haramasham pasuk the havi shomer china, because there's a machlokus. What is the status of a shomer aveda, someone who's watching over lost items? Are you a shomer chinam or are you a shomer sachar? Because remember, we learned that when I'm watching over a lost item, I'm getting benefit, a small benefit in that while I'm watching over it, I'm exempt from doing certain mitzvahs, like answering the door to someone who wants to collect tzedakah. For Sephardic teachers, they would have a din of a shomer sachar. For Ashkenazi teachers, that have a din of a shomer chinam. And then after we've written all of this, Shuv Yatza L'or Sefer Yoru Mishpatecha V'Ra'inu Sheharich B'Nidon Didan. There's a sefer called Yoru Mishpatecha, which is also a modern responsum work, and he also has a lengthy responsum on this very topic. V'He'ela Demuter L'Mara L'Kachas Es HaChefetz Me'atalmid Imhu Mafriya L'Shir. And he also writes that it is completely permitted for a teacher to confiscate an item from a student if he's disruptive to the class. B'sham hochiach mehamachane Ephraim deshut divrei Malkiel decholzman she'ein hashomer mekabel kesef al etzem hashmira, and he writes that based on proving from other svarim that so long as the shomer, the person who's watching over your item, has not accepted payment for that guardianship, so even if he's accepting payment for his work in general, he doesn't assume the role of a shomer sachar to be liable for theft. He's only a shomer chinam who's only liable for negligence. And therefore the teacher is only a shomer chinam. He can't be negligent. Now, by the way, I would also argue, and this is an interesting point, the teacher has a desk in the classroom. The classroom is unlocked, and the teacher has a lock to lock his desk. Is that sufficient shmira if we know that it's a very, very common practice for students to break into the teacher's desk and to pick the lock? I would submit to you that, we've seen movies about this, right? It's such a common practice for kids to break into the teacher's desk or to pick the lock or to break the lock and get back their items. I would submit to you that that's an insufficient method of shmira, since it is common practice for kids to act in a vandal-like way and to vandalize the teacher's desk. It would make more sense if the teacher has their own locker in the teacher rec room or something like that, which is under lock and key. That would probably make more sense to be the proper method of shmira. Okay. Or in, let's say, the principal's office or something like that. And then finally, the Makor Baruch talks about the status of a teacher who plays with the student's item, he says, then they'll be liable for even onsin. He says, because then you're a shoel shalom midas, because you're borrowing the item against the wishes of the person, and then you're like a goslin yourself. The teacher can sometimes become the goslin. Okay. And so that's okay.
Is that like just using just once the teacher? Is that?
Even if you use it just once. Yeah. So let me just bring up the for the time that we have remaining, the Sefer Mishnah Halachos, because that's an important responsum. Just give me 1 second. Where is it? Mishnah Halachos Chelek Vav. So I have it right here. Sineresh Pei Daled. Give me 1 second. Gotta get rid of this bar. So, I tell you, to have a whole library of Sfarim at your fingertips is just incredible.
You do research in each of the farms or
100%. It is such a powerful tool. My life as a teacher and as a student of Judaism has changed dramatically. I wish I had this when I was younger. Okay. So here's the tshuva. Let me share it so that people can see it. There we go. This is from Rav Menashe Klein, just for you to know who he was. Rav Menashe Klein was a Hungarian Rav, and after the war, he came to a DP camp in France, then to the US. He got smicha from the Kloisenberger Rebbe, and he published his first set of responsa in 1958. And was a Rav in a Hungarian Rav in Borough Park. He died in 2011. Okay. Anyway, is it permissible for the teacher to confiscate something from a child that he's playing with? And if it's permissible, or is it proper for the teacher to share this, to show this item that he confiscated to other people, especially if it could embarrass the child? He says, first he apologizes for taking so long to answer this question. And do we have an idea when this was written? I don't know. Okay, B'davar she'elato b'malamed haro atinok mesachek b'ma'oz shebiyado. Teacher sees a kid playing with money, o b'mesachek, or with a toy. Irashai hamalamed lenatlo mimeno menas lahachzira olo. He says, can the teacher confiscate it? And he says, oh, machmas she'ein hazman gorim laharich avo biktsar la'etzem ha'inyan. He says, let me get to the bottom line because I'm a little bit short on time. He says, Hechi da'aviv nasan lo lekatan matana, ikana hamatana. He says, first of all, is it the property of the child or is it the property of the parent? That's the first question that he says. Hine be'emes kidahu machlokas harishona mikatan zoicha midiorais or midirabanan. So machlokas, whether the child really has the ability to acquire something, if that's a rabbinic law or that's a Torah law. But the fact is that if an adult gives a child a gift, ultimately it does belong to the child. And we'll have to hold it here because we're out of time. But the bottom line is, as Rav Sharaga writes, that if you confiscate something from a child, you must return it by the end of the year. That's number one. And number two, you must put it under lock and key. Otherwise, you will be liable for negligence as a shomer chinam. Wishing you all an amazing Shabbos.
Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbat shalom. We will be learning next week. We'll learn Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Okay, I'll be around.
It's a short-
Oh, wait a minute. We have slichas, right? So we'll learn short. We'll learn short. We'll start at 6:10 and we'll learn for 15 minutes each day. Because I think slichas is at 6:30. Is that right? Okay. All right. Shabbat shalom.
When I was in